Hello and welcome to the Car Care Now channel. How you guys doing today? Hope everybody's doing well. Well, let's answer some questions and then we'll have a talk at the end. How about that? Let's start with Michael C. 2011 Camry 2.5 70K, bought 2 years ago. Want to do a coolant drain and fill with Toyota AM coolant, but the coolant in the radiator is green. Is it okay to mix green with pink? So you already have it there. Green is aftermarket coolant. So I would just drain it, try to drain. I don't think you have an easily accessible drain block drain on that engine. That's the 2ARFE. Just drain it on the radiator, fill it, maybe drive it for a week or two, and then drain it again. If you still see a hint of green, there is not a lot of coolant that you can get out of the block itself. So shouldn't be an issue mixing them if you it's already mixed. I mean, when they replaced it the first time, they already mixed it. So if you have no issues now, you're not going to have issues. That means the coolant that you have in there is compatible with what you have. Let's see the next question. And I do have a question from Pablo Rosado. And try to read that one. Second set Toyota ceramic pads at 36,000 miles and 199,000 miles. Looks like the first replaced at 65,000 miles, 2005 Corolla. So sorry, let me read this because you put it in three parts. I was hoping to upload the photo of the first ceramic pads replaced with 65,000 miles because it looks like the ones it has now with just 40,000 miles, like having 24,000 miles more. Is it too hard on a 17-year-old car like mine? Sorry, I'm going to rephrase that question. Your pads are wearing faster. That's what I'm understanding from your question. Ceramic pads sometimes will wear faster than normal, the factory ones. That's why they're half the price, but not at a rate that is significant. Um, and as far as the transmission fluid, I would not replace it every 15,000 miles, even though you have extreme use. I would go on that 2005 Corolla every 30,000. The earliest, anywhere from 30 to 60,000 is a good interval for that. Ravneet Gill. I have ordered a RAV4 Hybrid LE. Everyone says I should have gone for the XLE trim, but I can't afford to. Can you tell me if I have made the mistake, as I think 99% of the car is the same? You did not make a mistake because the first thing I see is don't buy a car that is more expensive than what you can afford. Now, the RAV4 itself, reliability wise, LE, XLE, they're going to be exactly the same. But what's going to be different is the options. You know, the XLE might have leather seats, smart key, all this other good stuff. But the car itself, for you to drive it and have it for 10, 15 years, 300,000 miles, it's going to be the same. That's what I want you to know. And the key word here is I can't afford to, then you shouldn't. You shouldn't go the XLE just because everybody says to do so, but you can't afford it. Then you're going to have the fancier car that everybody approves of, but then your financials will not be good. Always buy the car that you can afford, and that's my most recommendation here. Do not overstretch your budget. Any chance? Another question. Sorry, here, Spartacus. Any chance you'll review a 2020 or newer RX 350? And any chance you'll branch out and do a review of BMW X5? I'm trying to decide between these two vehicles. So on the RX 350, I am waiting to get one, and I can actually find out which car we're gonna get next in a little bit. I'll do that as we go, and I'll tell you which car we're gonna review next. Maybe it'll be an RX 350 because cars are really hard to come by these days, and they're trying to give me as much press cars as possible. But again, we have car shortage. It's gonna be an ES 250. So no, not the RX 350 yet. But on the BMW, I don't do BMW, although we have to BMW in Toyota land because of the Supra. But something I am considering, second channel maybe for non-Toyota content on the side. When it comes to be, it's not a priority at the moment, but eventually might not. I don't know. We'll see how this goes. Ron Howell. I really appreciate your latest video, how to make your Toyota last over 300,000 miles without major repairs. To answer a lot of questions. Well, thank you very much, sir, for your generosity and for your super chat. And I'm glad you liked the video. That video is I needed to make that video a long time ago, but I've done something similar in a big series where we talked a lot more about specific items when you go to a dealership, how to maintain your Toyota. I don't know if you guys have watched that series before, but this video is kind of more focused on the main items that a lot of controversy, a lot of questions, and these are the items that I get questions about all the time. So I figured let's put it in a video so everybody would see it in one place and get all the info in the same time. So, Bill Pace would love to know your insight on the new Tundra and failing turbos. So, folks, I've covered this before, and you'll see other folks talking about this, making a giant deal about it. I work in the real world, and in the real world, new models will have some issues when they come out, even from Toyota. That's just the way it is. But what's different is Toyota seems to take things seriously, and they really make improvements quick. You're not going to wait for 2-3 years to see improvements. You're going to wait maybe up to 6 months. The only problem with the Tundra is, turbos, they're having wastegate issues. Typically, it'll be, oh, yeah, let's just replace them under warranty. The car will be back in a couple days and life is good. But because of the parts shortage, that's delaying. And because some people, and I'll openly admit this, some people have taken this as an advantage to get media press or get exposure to themselves for personal gain. They've taken this to the next level because honestly, if you look back at the mighty V8 Tundra, they did have issues when they came out in 2007. They were resolved, gone, and nobody even talked about them anymore. And that's just the nature of it. I always recommend you wait 6 months on a brand new model with a new engine, new everything, new. Wait 6 months if you don't want to deal with this. But ultimately, cars have warranties because of that. Yeah, it's ideal that if these problems don't exist, but they do. And that's how it is. Nothing is perfect. But the main thing is they care and they're trying to fix the issues in a timely fashion. Unfortunately, everything is working against that because of the shortage, but that's how things are. That's why I strongly recommend that you wait the 6 months on a brand new model that would have a lot of new stuff before you jump and buy one. So Zhao Jeffrey bought a 13 Venza V6 with 100,000 miles a while back, and now almost at 120. Don't think the ATF was ever changed. What should I look for in items of maintenance future problems beside oil changes? So the first thing you're at is you want to do the spark plugs at this point if they've never been done. The transmission fluid, unfortunately, you're right at the point where there's some risk that there might be issues. I would take a small sample of that fluid, see how it is. Um, you can go as far as send it to a lab and all that, but if the fluid looks very clean, it doesn't seem like to have a lot of debris, perhaps do a single frame drain and fill and call it a day and see how things progress. But if it looks dirty and kind of had a burn smell to it, I would leave it alone, and because you might risk causing issues at this mileage. So Perry, thank you very much for your super chat. 2006 Toyota 4Runner V6, 215,000 miles. PO430 pending for a year. Goes away if I use Costco regular gas. Long-term fuel trim, 7 to 8%. On bank 2. Bank 1 is 2 to 3%. 14 miles per gallon highway. Bank 2 O2 sensor at idle is 0.15 to 0.750. I'm hoping that is sensor 2. Help me diagnose new CAT plus O2 plus AF. No, likely you have a failing catalytic converter, and not failed, failing, because the way cats fail, they run a monitor and they have like a. Let me try to describe it in the best way possible. They have, because cats will fail when they're cold. So in order for you not to always get catalytic converter codes, it'll have like a log. Okay, the catalytic converter failed 2 times and passed 4 times. So now the number is 2 passes. When that number starts to drop and drop and drop and drop, eventually gets below 0 and continuously drops, it's going to think, yes, the efficiency is dropping. It's going to set a pending code because it's going to keep an eye on it. Because if it still sees passes, it sees 2 failures, 3 passes, and then 2 failures, 2 passes. It's going to know that the efficiency is dropping, but it could be due to low weather, could be due to operating conditions. That's why they designed it that way. But you want to, if you put regular gas and it goes, if you put specific gas from a specific gas station and goes away, it's really borderline. And I would continue to do that until you have a hard code and you look at your O2 sensor and it's going from point 0.1 to point 0.7, point 0.8 continuously, not hovering. And then every once in a while, it'll switch. Otherwise, I don't think it's an O2 sensor or none of that, unless you have a very visible exhaust leak before between the two sensors. If you have an exhaust leak, that could cause a false reading on the O2 sensor, but otherwise it's really a classic catalytic converter. But I would wait for it to completely fail. It might take some time, and if you put regular gas and call it a day, I would do that, not jump to replace it. But as far as O2 sensors, if you don't have leaks, likely they're not the issue. Anonymous user, I have two cars, both with 2G RFE. I live in Michigan where it gets very cold. Sometimes when I start my car after sitting out in cold for a few days, I hear an ominous 1 second rattle. What should I be concerned? Honestly, that is the VVTi rattle, and that's a video I'm planning to explain exactly why they rattle and what's going on and what to do about that. But this is a start. There's going to be a point where it gets louder. Now, that point could be a week, could be a year, could be 10 years. I can't tell you. And I advise you not to do anything until it gets to that point. Don't fix it if it ain't broken. It is starting, but it could be a long time before it actually. When you get to a point where every time you start the car, you hear a giant rattle for 5 seconds, then it would be time to replace them. Expensive repair, engine has to come out. But if it hasn't gotten that point, I wouldn't. That's my recommendation here. So Joe D, 2020 Lexus EX3 300H, keys in pocket, the trunk intermittently, don't open 8 out of 10 times. Need to press 6 times or use the fob to open. Been in shop 3 times, took video to show them, always works when taken in. Now, the first thing is check the batteries on the key. That is the most simple thing. The second thing is that happening where the trunk doesn't open in the same spot, only one spot? That's something you want to watch for, because these smart keys, they could have interference. Like if you're underneath an electrical pole or high tension wires, they could have interference from that. If you work at a specific factory or facility that have interference, radio interference, that could cause it. So you want to watch, what are we where is this problem happening? If it's happening in the same spot, that's your key. Change the spot and see, because it could be interference. But if it's totally random, it might be the oscillator itself. But this is going to be really difficult to pinpoint and tell you exactly. But I would start with definitely with new batteries for the key and go from there. Bob Payne, I love your channel. Thank you so much for watching, sir. I recently watched your video on changing the CVT transmission fluid. When do you recommend unbolting the pan to clean it? So if you're changing the fluid regularly, I've taken so many oil pans, and I'll tell you this. Yes, there's going to be some stuff on the magnet. Yes, the filter will have very little stuff on it. You'll see a little bit at the bottom of the pan. But here's the best part. You take the pan down, clean it up, clean the magnets, shoe shine them, and all that good stuff. You drive the car for like 1,000 miles, you take it out again, it'll be exactly the same. That's just how it is. So the idea of the magnets is, in the pan, it'll have some debris, but that debris becomes kind of just sediment sitting in the bottom. So if it makes you feel better, take it out and clean it. But honestly, it doesn't do much. So as long as you're replacing the fluid on time, every 60,000 miles, you're not going to have issues because of that little stuff on the magnet. I mean, it could be 300,000 miles before it really becomes a giant glob, or maybe at that point. But at that point, I wouldn't risk taking a pan out of it, because you're draining the fluid and you might have issues. But not something I would worry about, honestly. Construct, want to buy a reliable used SUV, found a few in budget. 2008 RAV4 with 4-cylinder, 82,000 miles. 2013 Venza with V6, 110,000 miles, or 2012 Honda CR-V, 4-cylinder, 100K. Tested all three, enjoyed the Venza. Which is best based on your experience? So 2008 RAV4, if the engine has been repaired for the oil burning, that's a good car. But if you're not sure about that, I would walk away. The Venza with a V6 is very good. They do have a few common issues, of course. No car is perfect. 110,000 miles for a Venza, if it has good maintenance history, is nothing. That engine will last a lot longer than that. The CRV, honestly, I don't have experience with them. The last I know about CRVs from my short time with Honda is transmission problems, but that might be a year where they took care of it. I'm not the person to ask about the Honda CRV specifics of reliability, but between the 2008 RAV4 and a 13 Venza with a V6, not with a four-cylinder, I would take the Venza for sure. Jake Duncan, thank you for your super chat, sir. You have the best Toyota channel on YouTube. Well, thank you very much for watching my channel. Thank you for all the videos. How can I get my third generation Tacoma to go 300,000 miles? Well, it all has to do with maintenance. I have a video today that came out specifically answering that question in detail. But the main thing is, folks, maintenance. Some people buy Toyotas and they decide, you know what, I bought a Toyota. I don't need to do all this maintenance. I'll just do the bare minimum and call it a day. That's not how this works. You got to maintain them. These are good cars. Some cars, even if you maintain them, they'll just fall apart at a certain age and certain miles. But Toyotas, they do last, but you got to take care of them and not just dump um, infinite amounts of money just to keep them going. No, maintenance with intelligence. You need to know exactly what you're doing when you are doing it. And if you do it yourself, you can save a lot of money. Most maintenance is very simple on these cars. They're simple cars, and that's really the philosophy behind them, how they go along. But I advise you to watch that video. I put all the main key maintenance items that will usually the pitfalls, the stuff that people fall for and neglect or forget or not know about. I put it all in that video. So after the live stream, if you're interested, check out that video. It'll answer all your questions. Blue 87 FJ60. Just got confirmation of allotted 2022 TRD off-road Tacoma with my name on it from dealership at MSRP. Good for you, man. Never pay over MSRP. You know, people say, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." There are no dealers that sell at MSRP. Well, there is. I know at least of one, and there's many, but you got to look, and this is the problem. You got to look for those dealerships that will sell you at MSRP. So, Peter G, I just took delivery of my 2022 RAV4 Prime XSE. What is the break-in period? What should I avoid doing? I am concerned about keeping the battery fully charged most of the time. So, the first thing is the break-in period is anywhere from 500 miles to 1,000 miles. I recommend you go to 1,000, the full 1,000, maybe follow up with an oil change. Here's what I would do if I would have owned a RAV4 Prime, and that was a candidate for me when I bought my Camry. I would not charge it the first 1,000 miles. Honestly, I would just let the charge deplete and just drive the gasoline engine. Just drive it as a hybrid, normal. Change the oil at 1,000 miles, then charge it when you need it. If you're commuting every single day, let's say you have a day job, you work 5 days a week, charge it at night, set the charging schedule. You wake up in the morning, whenever your departure time is, go to work, come back, and depending on your commute, if you see, like, let's say your total commute two-way is 15 miles, you have 40 miles, don't charge it the next day. Just do your commute. It's okay if you run the gasoline engine. And on the weekends, I wouldn't charge it. I would just drive it normally, let the gasoline engine run and everything, because you also don't want your gasoline engine just to sit there, not run for weeks and weeks and weeks. That's actually not good for it. You want to weekly drive it on gasoline one day, and then one day just call it the lazy day and just don't charge it. Just use the gasoline, and that way you're cycling your gasoline, running your engine, and using your electric range. That would be my recommendation. I wouldn't keep the battery charged fully all the time and not use it. Whenever you charge the battery, use your E range, use your EV range, and you shouldn't have issues with the battery. So, Stephanie, I am trying to buy a 2022 TRD off-road premium 4Runner without KDSS. I have a deposit at a local dealership. If I do not get KDSS, do you know what kind of suspension I will have? Not X-Rius, right? Yes. So the X-Rius in 2022 is only available in the limited trim and in the TRD Sport. Any other trim, you will not get you will not get X-Rius. That is confirmed. It's not even available as an option. KDSS, however, is available on as an option. KDSS is different than X3S. X3S has to do with the shocks and the struts. KDSS is a sway bar. So KDSS is always an option. X3S is standard on the limited and the TRD Sport. So you're getting a TRD off-road premium. It will not have X3S. Could have KDSS, but cannot have X3S suspension. All righty. Let's see here. Iveco 69, the Toyota transmission fluid WS is synthetic or not? Honestly, that question has been asked. I have not gotten a straight answer for that. That question has been asked. I could not get a very specific official answer about what makes the WS fluid. So we're still in limbo on that. I'll actually talk about it when we do get a good answer for that. Ether Drive ran over a pothole in my 2012 IS250 and blew a chunk out of the sidewall in one of my rear tires. Tires are 6 months old. Should I just replace one? Depends how many miles you have on them. If your tire is like 5 30 seconds or less, I would replace two tires. And if the front tires are more worn than you want to even them out. If your tires are like at 7 8 30 seconds and the new tire is going to be 9 30 seconds, that should be okay. Just replace the one. But you also got to watch how worn are the rest of the tires. 6 months old, you could have driven 2,000 miles 6 months or 20,000 miles. That'll really depend. Just check the tires, see how worn they are, and go from there. If the fronts are not worn and like one of the rears is a little bit more worn than the one that blew out, put two new tires. I think that's what I would do. Michael Orallo, what maintenance should be done on a 4Runner with KDSS? Should I bring it to Lexus if I have KDSS issues instead of Toyota? No, you want to bring your Toyota to a Toyota dealership. No point of taking a Toyota to a Lexus because they're going to charge you more. And newsflash, this is something I actually came up recently, and I'll bring it to your attention in case you own a Lexus and you take it to a Toyota dealership. There is no warranty on the work when you take a Lexus to a Toyota dealership. Remember that, and vice versa, of course. I don't see the point of taking a Toyota to a Lexus dealership. See, Lexus technicians are working on Lexus products, which a lot of the Lexus, like the Toyota stuff, are not available on the Lexus side. So there is no point of doing that when you take a Lexus to a Toyota dealership, unless it's an LS or an IS or a GS, which Toyota technicians will have a little bit of less exposure to unless they live in an area with a lot of Lexus owners. The price is the biggest thing. I mean, just right off the bat, you're getting the same parts, same service, same training for less cost with no warranty, though. So remember that. I wouldn't take, if you have issues with your KDSS, then take it to a Toyota dealership. They're more than trained to work on it. But as far as maintenance for the KDSS, there's really none. There's nothing listed and nothing that I would recommend you do other than, if there's leaks, take care of them. Otherwise, you should have no issues with it. It's a pretty good system. It actually lasts a very long time. Bill Ward, is it a good idea to check the Banjo Bolt oil screen for the VVTi? I have 2011 Highlander 3.5, 210,000 miles. So if you have issues of contamination, that perhaps, but honestly, out of the hundreds, possibly thousands at this point of 2GR FE engines that I've taken apart, taken that little screen, I really haven't seen one. I've even seen one that grenaded the engine. The oil cooler line popped, and the thing just had a lot of metal debris in the pan, and it was knocking and just destroyed and done. Even that, I remember pulling the screen. I was curious. He said, let's pull the screen. See, there was nothing on it. So not something that is I would recommend you do. I mean, they're very simple. They're right there. Uh, if you want to do it, sure, but most likely you're going to pull it out and be perfectly clean because I really haven't seen one not clean yet. CR channel, do you recommend proactively replacing the COP coils on the 1MZFE, 2AZFE, and 3MZFE? If yes, at what mileage should I replace them? Honestly, coils are not a maintenance item. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. This applies really good here. Um, I wouldn't really replace them unless you have issues. If you pull a spark plug out, like let's say you're changing spark plugs, you pull the coil out, it's wet with oil, or you see something outstanding, then replace it. But otherwise, just for maintenance sake, I wouldn't. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So another question: who is the brake caliper supplier? One of the biggest suppliers is Advix, and I'll write that down in case it is not clear. I wrote that down in the bottom of the chat. That is one of the major suppliers for brake calipers. We see them all the time written Advix on the calipers themselves. Possibly there are other suppliers. Toyota doesn't really publish their suppliers very well, so we kind of have to pick out the pieces when we look at the parts, but that's one of the biggest ones. So Sherm FJ, which new Tacoma 3.5 oil change cycle do you recommend? 1K, 5K, 5K interval versus 1K, 3K, 6, 10, 5. So on the Tacoma, I would definitely go 5. On the break-in period, you want to do it at 1,000 miles, then again at 5,000 miles, and then every 5,000 miles after that. That's what I would do in my personal car, and what's good for me is what I recommend for you. I would definitely consider the 5,000 miles on that engine. Johnny Towns. I just received a 2008 Highlander with 240,000 miles. Should I change the transmission fluid? Unless you absolutely know for a fact that this fluid was replaced at least every 60,000 miles, I would not touch it, honestly, because that's high miles and you really do not want to risk it. So another question: 2021 RAV4 Hybrid Limited, on the rear view mirror camera is in the upper right corner, is a battery logo. What is it for? Huh. Trying to understand this question. On the rear view mirror camera in the upper right hand corner is a battery logo. Oh, I haven't seen that battery logo. I don't remember having any battery per se. I'm gonna have to look into this one for you. But do leave me a comment in the after we're done with the live stream. Leave me a comment. Let me look into it. Lala G, how you doing, man? Good to see you. So Lala G, how long you think this chip shortage will last, in your opinion? Well, the problem is, it feels like we're going from chip shortage to now, like, basically lack of employees, I suppose, on both sides, on the factories making the stuff, and then on the truck drivers getting the stuff to us. I mean, I'm starting to see some very strange things show up at the dealership here. We had 3 RAV4 Primes show up like within the last week or two. They're all 2021 models, believe it or not, and they're all built in November. That is almost 4 months here. 4 months that this car has just been sitting somewhere or in transit. I mean, 4 months, that's a long time to get a car from Japan here, and not one, many. So we're starting to see some strange models show up, and we're in 2022. We're still getting 2021 cars that we have never seen. So the problem is not just the shortage. The problem is getting this stuff from the suppliers. And that's the kind of like the phase 2 of the problem, because there's a shortage of truck drivers, there's a shortage of workers, there's a shortage in everything, it seems like these days. So that's the next problem. So 87GN, with the Land Cruiser essentially gone from the US market, what's the best way for me to keep my 2016 model good for the next 20 years? Main thing is rust. If you don't live in an area with salt use and rust and all of this baddie stuff, you're good, because these things, they really last. And take care of the maintenance. They do require some maintenance. Nothing specialized or very difficult or very expensive, but they do like their maintenance. Keep up the maintenance. You're not going to have an issue. You're going to keep this car for a long time. And if you do live in rusty land like me, Chicago area, you do want to undercoat the frame. Make sure you're kind of being proactive. Undercoat the frame, clean it after the winter. Make sure you still clean it, because there's other components you can't really spray. That's really the best way to preserve this car for as long as possible. So, George Lopez, what are the common pros and cons of the Camry 3.0 liter versus the 3.3? So, we're talking about the 1MZ and the 3MZ. So, both of them are really good engines. The 1MZ is really sensitive to oil changes. You don't change the oil, with anywhere between 3 to 5,000 miles. They were notorious to have oil sludge. And at some point, Toyota kind of took that under their wing and took care of those issues. But the 3.3 seems to be a little bit better, more resilient because it got updated because it was a later engine, got updated for some of these problems. But that's the one thing with these engines. Otherwise, they're really bulletproof. I mean, internally, they're not going to have many issues with, granted, give good maintenance. They do have a timing belt. As they age, they do get oil leaks, valve cover, cam and crank seals, but nothing impossible or extremely expensive to do. That's really the biggest thing with the 1MZ and 3MZ. Beautiful engines. I recently had the pleasure of replacing one on a 2001 Camry. That was quite the journey because the car is old and rusty, but good engines. These are really good engines. So Theory Godet have a Lexus RX 450H with towing package. I am planning on towing an RV about 3,100 pounds. You should be good. You have the towing package. I got to look up the actual spec, but as long as you're below the maximum allowed towing capacity, you should be good. You should have no issues, but make sure you replace that transmission fluid. I'm sorry, this is a hybrid. You're still between 60 and 90,000 miles. You shouldn't have a lot of issues. Should be good. Arion A 2011 Camry 2.5 AC doesn't blow very cold when idling on a hot day. Blows cold when moving. New cabin filter. Good Freon charge and condenser fan seems to work. Any other known issues? So the only thing that is I would look at is pull the condenser off a little bit. Don't disconnect it and all that. Just pull it off a little bit and see if there is a blockage between them. Sometimes you get a lot of like debris stuck to the radiator. That's the one thing. And when you said the charge was good, is it professionally good? Did they recycle and charge the exact amount? And is the fan going at a good speed? Sometimes the fan could and then you'll see it going, but it's like barely turning. So that's something you want to look into. But do check the debris between the radiator and the condenser. And Matthew Black, please see my question posted about my NX. I'll have Mrs. Car Care and I'll dig that one out. Okay. Let's read that one. So, is it common for the power liftgate strut to go out in the Lexus NX series? Can the computers can't tell me which one is bad? They're so expensive. So yes, just like the RAV4, they have the same actually shocks. They do go out and they are expensive. Honestly, I wouldn't replace one. I would replace both. I know they're expensive, but you're gonna have this snowball effect where you replace one, the other one goes, and then you replace the other one, and because you only had one working, the other one now goes out again. Now you're going back to get it covered under warranty. Just replace them both and be done with it. That is something we learned the hard way, and I recommend it. You don't go back and forth. Just replace them both and be done with it. Hoang Durang just bought a 2014 IS350 F F Sport with 105,000 miles. Is that high mileage? Dealer recommended doing fuel injector and differential fluid service. Should I get them? And any other common problems? Honestly, in that year of the IS, there's not a lot of common issues. Honestly, just maintenance. People usually neglect them. I don't know why they do, but keep up the maintenance. And as far as the injector clean, not really. But the differential, yes, that is something. If it's never been done or it's due, has been at least 30,000 miles, I would get it done. So skinny girl, generally, when should you change your ignition coils? When they fail or a certain mileage interval? I would only replace them when they fail. This is not a maintenance item. Just it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because you replace them just because. It could be 10 years before they go out. So why are we replacing them? That's R. Cavazos. What lift, scissor, or post do you recommend for DIY for oil changes, tire rotation, shocks, struts, minor stuff? 2018 Tacoma. TRD off road. So here's my opinion, and you're either gonna floor jack and jack stand it, or you're going to spend some money and get something proper. My personal recommendation is look into the Quick Jack by Benpack. They are truly professional grade for DIY. They're a little bit on the expensive side. You do want, if you want to get the bigger one that can really take some heavy weight, they're a little bit on the expensive side, over $1,000. But I have put the one that I have through some pretty heavy use here. I don't use it for, occasional oil change. I'm using it weekly, and I use it a lot, and I don't treat it with love because it is an equipment to me, and it just gets thrown around and really beaten. I've lifted a Tundra with it, multiple actually Tundras with it. It holds up very well. Yes, the fittings sometimes leak, but that's really the worst of it. Quick Jack by Benpack, they are really good. Expensive, but that's what I can recommend with good conscience. I have one. I really put it to use, and I haven't had issues with it. So, Crispy 2018 Tacoma V6 automatic transmission. I keep hearing different stories about whether or not there's a TSB to reflash the computer to fix the gear hunting issues. And would that be a warranty item? I would have to look up the actual VIN range of which cars had the update already from the factory, and some of them didn't. Really, it affected mostly 16, some 17s, very few 18s. And if it's going to be an 18, it's going to be an 18 built in 2017. Your dealer, this is a warranty item. Your dealership should be able to look up by your VIN number if your car had old software or new software. There's actually a VIN range in the TSB, or if you have access to the TSB. TSBs are public information. You can look it up and find it. Kind of hard to decipher the VIN range sometimes with Toyota. They're just not very clear about it because they expect technicians to look at this. But you want to find out if your VIN is included in that VIN range, because if it's not, then you already have the latest software. The gear hunting, it is an issue with these, but try to ask your dealership to reset the transmission memory, and from there, drive it, at least put like 15, 20 miles on it at moderate speeds for it to learn your driving habit, because when you reset the memory, it's going to start relearning everything, and that's how you kind of remedy some of that. Okay, so Mick McNulty, sorry about that. I am an old pensioner who has just acquired 1994 Camry and no history at 108,000 miles. It's all I have for transport. What should I worry about the most? Honestly, if this is not a rusty car, I wouldn't worry too much. These cars, they were built like a tank. They're very basic. They do have their things as they get old, oil leaks, coolant leaks here and there. But as long as the car is safe, if you do have rust on it, you want to check the brake lines, you want to check the overall integrity of the body. But if you don't have rust, and this is a relatively rust-free car, they're actually good. You're going to have oil leaks. You're going to have noises here and there from the suspension. After all, this is an older car, but it does have very low miles. 108,000 miles for a 94 Camry is nothing. You'll usually see them 300,000 miles easily, but keep up the maintenance. So, oil changes every 3,000 miles on these. That's a good idea. If you have oil leaks, try to remedy the important ones where you're not leaking oil all over the place. If it doesn't have any, then that's good. And try to investigate its service history, because sometimes these have spark plug wires and cap and rotor and all this goodies. You don't want to just go and replace stuff just because that's an unnecessary cost. I'd rather you look into the history of the car and see what was done to it already. Dennis Paddock, 2013 Lexus ES 300H, 130,000 kilometers. Does the transmission fluid need to be changed out? If so, when? And what about the engine and inverter coolant? So we just talked about this, Dennis, in today's video. The transmission fluid, anywhere from, I'm trying to remember the exact kilometer range, anywhere from 100,000 kilometers to 150,000 kilometers. You're right in between that range. So whenever possible and convenient, get it replaced. It's just a simple drain and fill. If you do your own work, super simple. I have a video for that. And The engine inverted coolant every 70, 80,000 kilometers. Sorry, my conversions are not the best. It's a weekend after all. Um, at this point, you do want to get them replaced. That's a good idea here. Both of them at the same time. Use original coolant. Again, also DIY friendly, not something very complicated. I do have a video for that as well if you want to do it yourself. Hubert L. My 2004 Sienna with 171,000 miles had transmission pan dropped last month to change the fluid. Now I am seeing an 8 by 8 spot of transmission fluid on my driveway. What happened? Could have been the gasket is leaking, but then one thing I will say about these transmissions that was somewhat common and not something I would be concerned about is the transmission case would leak. The transmission has two pieces. They have sealer in between them and they're together. Then the pan sits at the bottom. Very common for these for the case to leak. But since you just have work done on it, the pan dropped, you don't want to revisit that with your mechanic. Just the person who did the work, have them look at it. If you did this yourself, go and look. Did the gasket fold? Did some piece of debris got stuck? That's why the gasket is leaking. But if the gasket itself is dry, but you see oil more toward the back of the transmission, that is really the case. And I wouldn't worry too much about it unless you want to tear into a transmission. You basically have to remove the transmission, separate the case, reseal it, put it back. Not really something cost effective, especially with miles. Not something I would put high on my recommendation list. Patrick Alexander, what should I buy, guys? A new Tacoma or a new Forerunner? Can't decide. Honestly, Patrick, if you don't need a truck with a bed, get a Forerunner. You're gonna like it more. Rides nicer. It just feels more solid. But if you need something with a bed, Tacoma is your only option here. The only thing with the Tacoma is the transmission is really annoying. That 6 speed takes a while for it to really learn. It still hunts for gears, and the Forerunner is just you can't go wrong with the Forerunner. Sorry, I'm just biased towards the Forerunner. That's just my personal opinion. Go with what you need, what you are looking for in your next truck. Shah G Autos, can you add an OEM Toyota transmission cooler to a 2021 Tundra for a 2018 Tundra? What parts do you need? Is it fairly easy to do? So you can, but it is not a straight not as straightforward. You need to do some research on the parts because there are so many different configurations for that cooler. There are some that had the transmission warmer, some didn't, some had the one in the radiator, some didn't. So there is, I wish I had it handy. I had a one of my Patreons that I helped a while back. We kind of talked about this back and forth. There was a company that put a kit together with OEM parts. I wish I can find it. If I do, I'll post it somewhere. I hope you can see it. But yes, you are mostly using OEM parts. You just have to find which exact parts do you need dependent on what you have currently on your truck. Don Y. Besides frame rust, any particular things you would look for when buying a used 100 series Land Cruiser or early model years of the 200 series? 200 series is really a tank. They don't have much common problem. I mean, the worst thing is some interior stuff, seat not moving, little stuff like that. Mechanical, the worst thing I've seen with a 200 series is a leaky water pump. Brakes, they tend to chew up brakes a lot, but otherwise not really much. With the 100 series, you will have, depending on which 100 series you're buying, if you're buying a 98 versus a 2006, there is a pretty different age wise. But if you're buying an older one, leaks from the engine valve cover, as they age, they do start leaking. Not a major issue. Timing belt, has that been done? That's kind of expensive proposition on the 100 series. But otherwise, if you have hydraulic suspension, check for leaks. These can be a little expensive when they do eventually leak. But if it doesn't have hydraulic suspension, you're good. They don't really have a lot much. Same thing with the brakes. The brakes can be expensive, and the bearings. These are the old school design where when you want to pull the rotors, you got to pull the bearing and all this stuff and repack them or replace them and all those goodies. But the main thing is look for leaks because as they get older, they're going to develop some oil leaks. Mainly valve covers, front CV boots. Just have the car looked over. There's nothing chronic, where I would tell you, if you see this, run away. These are really good cars. Of course, you still want to buy one that has good maintenance history. Don't buy one just neglected, but you can't go wrong with the 100 series. I almost bought one and I still feel bad not buying one. They're horrible on gas. That's why I didn't buy it. Jason Montejano, 12 Camry, constant vibration, more noticeable at highway speeds, worsens when braking. Brake pedal feels weird at times. Notice rear right brake are screeching when rolling. So, very highly likely is you have a locked up rear brakes. I'm assuming this is rusty land where you live. This is very common on these. The pad seize up in the pad holder. You just want to, at this point, if they're screeching, likely you one of the sides almost wore metal where you're hitting the um, warning indicator. So you do want to address the rear brakes. That's the first place I would look at. Take them apart, clean everything. Make sure when you're done cleaning everything that the pad just moves very freely in the holder. Otherwise, you did nothing. You'll be right back at it in a few months. So make sure you clean it very well. I have a video. I talked about this and how to replace the brakes and what you want to eventually lead to. It is a three-part series. Yes, some people have made comments, why is it so long? But that was a different time in the channel. We were trying to make videos shorter. That I wouldn't do that again. But we're trying to I don't do short videos. I should do videos that get you to the end result of what we're talking about, not really focus on shorter videos to keep things quick. Good jobs don't go quick. So that is the first thing I would look at, honestly, the rear brakes. The Dreamer Ken Mobile One ATF that is compatible with Toyota power steering, bought from the dealership, be used on a 2009 Camry V6. Dealership says it's okay to use, but is it? So you can use it if you're in a pinch, just you need fluid, you're leaking, or whatever the case may be. But I would honestly still use dedicated power steering fluid. We talked about this in today's video. See, automatic transmission fluid is meant for automatic transmissions. Power steering fluid is meant for power steering systems. Because of the additives, automatic transmission fluid today is really harsh. It has very harsh cleaners that could attack seals, and now we have leaks everywhere. Do use dedicated power steering fluid. Go to your parts store, dealerships. They'll say anything to sell you what the products that they have on the shelf sitting and nobody buys. So I would look for dedicated power steering fluid. So let's see here. Na- Nazaritos. I have a 2015 Venza, 54,000 miles. Should I do a drain and fill for the transmission fluid? Yes, I think you think age-wise, you are a good time interval to drain the fluid and replace it, and life is great. Franklin Colado, I really enjoy your videos. Well, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, sir. I recently bought a 2021 RAV4 Hybrid XSE, and I noticed the painted wheels are not fully painted behind the rims. Is this how they come, or is this a defect? Some of them, yes, that's how they come. They don't paint them all the way through. And unfortunately, sometimes it's uglier than others, but they don't paint them all the way through, especially on the XSE wheels. You're not going to see them black all the way through. You're just going to see the face black and the back is actually silver. That's the same case with my Camry XSE. Same thing. And actually, one of my wheels, the paint's bubbling. So go figure. We'll deal with that when we deal with that. Sumit Kumar, where can we buy online Toyota fluids like Toyota engine oil, Toyota transmission coolant, and filters? I honestly don't recommend you buy fluids online because the shipping is a nightmare for fluids. It's very difficult. It's expensive, and I'd rather you just stop by your dealership. But I don't really know a specific source where you can really buy fluids other than eBay and Amazon. But I don't really recommend that because there's a lot of uh, shady sellers. They'll sell you all kinds of weird stuff. I wouldn't. Your best place is it remains your dealership. Call around, shop for prices. Some dealerships have a ridiculous overstock of fluids that they want to get rid of, and they'll make you a deal. Just it can't hurt to ask. Hey, can you give me a discount on this fluid? I'm buying a case of WS, whatever whatever the case may be. Wouldn't hurt to ask. I mean, worst they can say is no. Sometimes they'll say yes and surprise you. SM 5-speed, fifth generation Camry ran 800 miles low on transmission fluid. Was shifting rough, shifting fine after leveling, but is the transmission ruined in the long run? There is some damage, and I'm not going to call it damage. There is some extra wear that happened because of that, but I wouldn't be concerned. Top it off and hope for the best. You likely will not have issues. These transmissions can take a beating, and trust me, there are so many people out there that just do this procedure incorrectly, and they're driving for thousands of miles with low fluid, and they don't even notice, and they're fine. So don't worry. 800 miles not going to, unless it was continuously shifting rough, and you just kept driving through it. Usually they'll get better as they warm up, but when they're cold, they're really not like it. The low fluid, unless it was a lot of low fluid, but you should be good. Don't worry. I mean, there is somewhere that happened. Yes, I'm not going to lie to you, but hope for the best, and it'll be okay. Don't worry. As long as it's shifting fine today, when you fix the fluid level, you're good. Andreas, please help. I'm from Ecuador and don't trust the dealer here. Andreas, I don't see your question. I would love if you post it at the end, maybe, or post it as a comment, and I'll try to help you. But I don't see your question. James, should I rust proof undercoat my 2019 RAV4 hybrid? Mostly covered in panels, but I live in Alberta, Canada, with some salt on the roads. Honestly, not as high on my list on the newer cars because of the coverings. Now, some people will try to spray the suspension and the stuff that you can see, but not as high on my list also, because suspension stuff will always get rust. They always move, and even when you undercoat them, they'll still find their rust will find their way to them. But the main thing is the body. And this is something I want to do. My Camry, I didn't undercoat it, and I drive in salt land. And I do want, when we get to spring, I'll just take all the covers down, and we're going to do an investigation to see, are these covers really covering the bottom of the car, where you take them down, everything is nice and clean, there's no salt sitting on the body? Because salt sitting on these plastic covers, it ain't going to rust anything. They're just plastic covers. They really do a good job of covering these cars these days. So not very high on my list these days, honestly, with your specific car. Trucks with an exposed frame outside, absolutely. But 19 RAV4 hybrid, not very high on my list, honestly. Michael Campbell, 2021 RAV4 hybrid. Do you recommend adding heat in the fuel system to eliminate moisture in the fuel tank? Will this help to keep the injectors clean? I wouldn't add anything. This car has direct injections. You do not want to add anything that is an additive. Please don't. If you're worried about moisture, if this is a car that sits all the time, perhaps, but be very careful with direct injectors and additives, because you're not going to have issues with injectors leaving them as is. But if you add the wrong additive, you're going to have issues. So be careful. So, Lenny, how can you disable the seatbelt chime in a 2021 Venza? This is a customization that the dealership can do. They might have you sign a paper for liability, but the dealership can disable it. Takes 5 minutes, if that. And they usually don't charge for it. Some dealerships, they're very hungry and they want to charge for everything, but they shouldn't. The dealership where I work, that we don't charge for that stuff, but it's a 5-minute thing. It's just with a scan tool. You hook up the scan tool and um, disable it, and that's it. You can do it for the driver, passenger, even the rear seats, whichever one you want to disable. Joey the Dime, I am going from a 2019 Forerunner to a 2022 and want to move the wheels and tires from the 2019 to the 22. Do you know if the 22 uses the same TPMS as the 19? Yes, it does. Exactly the same. They're programmed right up. Life's good. But you do have to program them, though, if you want to move them along. So, another question. 1999 Lexus LS 400 is by far the best Lexus ever built. It is. Unless you see the nightmares when they get really old. like going back to the early 90s. Nobody talks about this. Wire harnesses falling apart and mysterious, what do you call it? Mysterious mobilizer not working. There are some, look, even the best car, when they get really old, you're going to have issues and nobody will talk about them, but that's the truth. So it was the best car ever built in the day, but even the best car built, when it gets old, things will go, and that's just the nature of it. New owner 2004 Avalon. Sorry, this was Donner Jacob. New owner 2004 Avalon XLS with 35,000 miles. Man, that is a gem. That is one that is good to find. Added four new tires with balance and alignment, but it still pulls to the left. Trusted mechanic says it's fine, but I don't like it. Honestly, Donner, I love you and care for you. That's why I'm going to tell you this. This is normal for this car. And the reason for that is it has the loosest steering in the planet. I mean, you drive this thing on any type of crown on the road, it'll start pulling one way or another. That's the way they are. They're very sensitive to this. And I have seen people, customers, that we begged them not to do anything. And they kept saying, no, I want you to fix it. And they dumped so much money. And in the end, it was still the same. They were still not happy with it. Um, this is a characteristic of this car. And this was something I know exactly what you mean. It is really prominent in that generation. Avalon got slightly better in the next generation, but still, it was really until 2013 when it really got rid of this issue. It just wonders a lot. Loves to follow the road. That is one of the biggest downfalls of this car. But please look past it because this is such a good car, especially with that miles. This is such a good car. And one thing you can do is your choice of tires. If you're putting the softest tires available, you're gonna kind of amplify this issue. But if you put some tougher tires, Bridgestone seems, Bridgestone Turanza tire to own, by the way, but it seems to help a little bit with this issue. Um, don't overspend on this issue. Trust me, it is a characteristic of this car to follow the crown of the road and really be all over the place. That's just how this thing is, but it's a really good car. Don't sell it just because of that, because it's a really good car. Okay. So Tomas, buy a 2006 double cab Tundra or a 2007 and up. If you can find a 2006 Tundra that is in good shape, doesn't have rust, and you don't really need that higher towing capacity of 07 and up, you should be good with the um, '06 double cab Tundra because they are really bulletproof and they're just amazing. They're so smooth. That engine is the best. But the '07 and up is good. I usually try like to avoid the '07s unless you find one that's in good shape and taken care of. But '08 and up should be good. But '06, it's just a dear one to my heart. Let's look at a question that Mrs. Carr Carnot is sending to me. 2022, sorry, Jania 85. 2022 Toyota Sienna, sorry, not Tacoma, 2,000 miles, not a heavy footer with a pedal, but even after braking time, I'm not getting the MPG past 32. 32 MPG is great, but don't know why it is not giving 36. So it's really going to depend on your driving style. And I know you say you're not a heavy footer, but are you driving on the highway? Do you have cargo? Do you have people in the car? And the main thing is the weather cold? That's really the biggest thing right now. Do check your uh, tire pressure, the standard stuff that I always tell you when you have gas mileage issues. But between 32 and 36, that's not a huge drop. That sounds like a weather related drop. Let's see when we pass the winter how it looks and go from there. But as far as if you're all of a sudden getting 25 or 20, yeah, we might have a problem. But that slight drop might be weather related. That's the only thing I can think of. And look who we have here, Automotive Press, Mr. David. I just logged in, saw your live stream. I want to say hi. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Absolutely, David. David is a really good friend. Automotive Press. Don't know if you know his channel. Brilliant engineer and a dear friend of mine. If you don't know his channel, check it out. He's a good guy. Let's see. Where were we at? Johnny LE. When should we do the first oil change for new 2022 Lexus RX V6? 100,000 miles, 3K, 5K. So 1,000 miles is good for the break in oil change. Then again at 5,000 miles, then every 5,000 miles after that. Jack 2 AZFE with 150,000 miles. Should I change any of the pumps or pulleys with the belt? If the water pump's not leaking or doesn't have play, don't replace it. The any really that engine, I'm trying to remember, it doesn't have idlers, just have the tensioner. If the tensioner doesn't have play or noise, don't worry about it. Otherwise, just put the belt, call it a day. Basically, I wouldn't worry too much about the others. But the water pump, if it has play or is leaking, do replace it. Oscar Martinez, do you believe it's wise to replace the head gasket on my 2011 CT200H or sell it instead? Well, the first question is, do you have an issue with the head gasket? If you do, honestly, it's going to depend on the rest of the car. Is this car in good shape? Does it have rust? Does it have other issues? Because typically, this is how people get themselves in trouble. I'll just say it right off the bat. You replace the head gasket, small fortune. Okay, well, we had this car all these years, didn't have any problems. Let's put a head gasket. What about the rest of the car? What about the engine? Is it burning oil? What about the hybrid battery? In this case, this is a big deal. Like, this is where you want to decide, what did you spend on this car in the last 3 years? Do you do anything other than maintenance? If you did, like, let's say, okay, 2 years ago I put a brand new hybrid battery, it might be worth it because that's really a big ticket item. But if the hybrid battery is original, you have a chance to sell it, auction, and whoever's going to buy it obviously knows it has problems. Then it doesn't make financial sense to fix it. If this car has 300,000 miles, obviously it doesn't make financial sense to fix it. But if it has 100,000 miles, the rest of it is good, it might be actually worth it. That's just my opinion. This is a tough question and one that I'm actually going to venture off in. Is Toyota more reliable than Honda? You know what? I'm gonna have to think about this one for a second. So they're both really good, but here's where, in my opinion, Toyota potentially excels over Honda, and where Honda excels over Toyota. Toyota is just conservative. They are a much larger company than Honda, and they have a bigger R&D and they have bigger budgets than Honda. Honda is more daring. They're not afraid to come out with new technology and just throw it on their production car and hope for the best. Hence why they do have some issues sometimes. I mean, how many years did we have horrendous transmissions in Hondas? That was the time that I briefly worked with Honda. It was horrible. It was transmission land. There was transmissions everywhere because they would not let go. Do have that Kaizen principle where they want to continuously improve, but they start at such a lower level. Toyota usually waits more to improve things before they actually put it in a production car. But Honda, because of their daring nature, their cars tend to be slightly more adventurous sometimes than Toyota. Toyota is a lot more conservative, and I personally like Toyota more than Honda's. More comfortable seats, better kind of packaging. Honda doesn't have the trucks; they don't have real trucks, at least. But you can't go wrong with both. Honda do have their issues. Toyota have their issues, but again, it comes down to maintenance after all. And just like Toyotas have some models I'll tell you to avoid. The Honda list might be a little bigger than Toyota, but they're both good cars compared to others. They're obviously uh, both good cars. This is an interesting question. Can you put peanut butter in spark plug boot to cancel out a cylinder for better gas mileage? I wouldn't do that. I don't even know if that works, but I wouldn't do that. That doesn't sound like an adventure I want to venture off into. Another question. Have you seen many newer Tundras with AC compressors that make noise on startup after sitting a few days? Yes, that one is actually something that's under investigation. You do want to take it to your dealership if this is still under warranty. I mean, you're saying newer. Um, the first thing I would do is recharge, evacuate, and recharge the system, and go from there. But yes, this is something that's surfacing lately. Carolyn RV Live. How many? Okay, we're not going to do that question. Sorry, bud, but the question is a little irrelevant to what we're talking about. So, Ara, I have a 2022 Prius XLE, not Prime. My question is there anything that can go wrong if I add aftermarket sound system, subwoofer speakers? There's nothing that's going to go wrong, but just don't go over the top. And what I mean over the top is a system that every time the bass hits, the whole interior lights dim. That's over the top. But something sensible where you want nicer sound, better sound shouldn't be an issue. I mean, they can handle the load, but nothing over the top. That's all I will say. So quick shot gaming. What kind of fuel mileage does a Prius and Corolla hybrid get at higher highway speeds, 75 to 80 miles an hour? So at 75 to 80 miles an hour, you're going to be pretty close to your highway rating of the car itself. But as you creep over 80 miles an hour, actually that number will start sharply to drop. I mean, drive a Prius flat out or a Corolla hybrid, like pedal to the metal. You're going to be shocked how bad they become at higher speeds. You start going over 90 miles an hour, their gas mileage really drops. Because if you're driving a hybrid at over 90 miles an hour consistently for long periods of time, you bought their own car, because they're not meant for that. And their efficiency kind of goes out the window. It becomes counterproductive at a point. But you at 75, 80, you can expect pretty close to their highway rated mileage, maybe slightly less. Ideally, you want to keep hybrids below 70 miles an hour for most efficiency. After 90 miles an hour, you actually start kind of overusing things. The transmission will become really loaded up. Not recommended for long periods of time, but anywhere from 70 to 80, you're not at peak efficiency, but it's okay. You get pretty close to your rated MPGs for highway. So Charles Branch, thank you so much, sir. And Mrs. Carr Kiernot is sitting right here. So she read that comment too, and she appreciates it, sir. Thank you very much. Jose Carlos, what is the lifespan expectancy of the dynamic force engine? So, the latest example of a high mileage dynamic force engine that we have seen is just under 300,000 miles. There's one that surfaced. It was a cab. I think it was a 2018 Camry hybrid. 2.5 A25A. It had 280,000 miles, something like that. Came in for an oil change. That's all I'm gonna say. And guess what oil it's using? 0W16. So yeah, so far we've had some issues here and there with little stuff, injector here, motor there, software update here. We've had the valves, the coolant switching valves in the back. Some of them went bad. That was more RAV4s than Camrys for some reason. Isolated thermostats here and there, but nothing that seems chronic where, I mean, let me tell you how it works at a dealership when things are chronic. Water pumps, for example, on V6s. I mean, we have herds of them where here is all of a sudden you have 15 water pumps at the same time. And then a week passes, here's another 15 water pumps at the same time. The thermostats on the V6, 2GRFKS, same thing, 15 at the same moment. 15 of them at the dealership. And then a week passes, another 15. That's how you know there's a common problem. Well, when I get uh, like a A25A with a bad switching valve for the coolant, you get one, and then a month passes, and you get another one, and then 3 months pass, and then you get another. That's not common enough for me to say this is a notorious and common problem. But when I have uh, 10, I'm not exaggerating this, 10 2009, 2010 RAV4s coming in with the same concern. Oh, every time I make a turn, my car dies. Well, yeah, because it's running out of oil, because it's burning oil, because you decided to change the oil every 10 to 15,000 miles, use the cheapest oil possible. That becomes kind of a concern when I have 10 every single week show up for the same thing. We're topping off these cars. That's how common problem trends happen. This is where I make these videos and I tell you, this is what I see all the time, over and over and over. for the same thing. But the dynamic force, when I start seeing high mile engines, it still doesn't mean that we're not going to have issues, but it's a good sign. I own a dynamic force engine, so I really hope they're going to be reliable. You know what I'm saying? But um, we've seen a high mileage example, doesn't seem to have issues. Now, that's one. There's millions of them out there. So we'll see. But so far, it's looking good. So Sanjay, 2010 Toyota RAV4 LE to ARFE, 186,000 miles, found engine oil in second spark plug well. Do you think it's spark plug seal? And to replace the spark plug tube seal, do I have to remove the valve cover? So it is not the spark plug seal, the valve cover seal for the tube. That seems to be everybody wants to do that. It doesn't really fix your oil inside because I'd have to show you a valve cover to explain it, but it doesn't really, most people want to do it, but it doesn't fix it. It's the tube itself. And the problem is, in the olden days, these tubes used to be screwed in with a sealer. You know, there's a special tool that undoes them, and now you just like a bolt, you take them out, seal them, and put them back. But the newer engines, they're pressed on. So the problem is when you go to remove them, you could damage the tube. And that's the problem. So you have to buy a new tube. Tubes are not readily available. It might lead into a new cylinder head. So I would clean it, drive it, see how long it actually takes to collect that same amount of oil. Because sometimes it could take 10 years to get that little amount of oil. At that point, it's not worth fixing it, of course. But clean it up, drive it, reassess after 5,000 miles. Look, do you see any more oil? If you see like one drop, that's not a big issue because the alternative could be replacing a cylinder head because for some reason these tubes don't come separate from it. So, folks, we'll take a few more questions, then we'll have a little chat. Let's see. Mrs. Karkirna just sent me this one. Inverse Diablo. Thoughts on a 2003 Celica GTS 6-speed manual as a daily? What problems should I look out for? So, 2003. Okay. These are essentially similar-ish to a 2003 Corolla. They do like to burn oil if not maintained right. They do have their oil leaks here and there, nothing excessive or abnormally. Replacing the coolant and bleeding the coolant is a pain on these. I remember that. But if this is not a rusty car, it's an okay car. It's a good car if it's been well maintained. But if it's a rusty car, these are really not good with rust. They fall apart. I remember not too long ago, we had one that was all tricked out with a body kit and whatever. Couldn't even lift it because the lift goes right through the body because it's so rusty. If it's not a rusty one, you're good. If it is, do yourself a favor. You're not going to want to drive a car like that daily. And given that it is a Celica, if you live in snow, and it's really not good in snow, but otherwise it is actually reliable if it's been taken care of. Just expect things as they age and as they have miles. Expect things that are gonna happen, and that's just the nature of it. All right, folks, let's take a few more questions, and we'll have a little chat, and we'll call it a day. So, Charles Elias just purchased a 2014 Lexus GX 460. Any common issues with these Lexus GXs? Not that many common issues with these. They're little tanks. They're kind of like the Forerunner. Just keep up the maintenance. If this is a model equipped with KDSS, you're gonna potentially at some point maybe replace one of the two shocks for the KDSS. Front shocks, if this has the adaptive suspension, the front shocks, keep an eye on them. Some of them do develop some leaks around this age, but otherwise, not really much. Just keep up the maintenance. These are really good trucks. You bought a good truck there, sir. J-Man, I'm very interested on the new GR86. Just wondering, what do you think since it's a Subaru engine? Honestly, we've talked about this in the past. I'll just say it again. I was not very impressed with the first Scion FRS or whatever you want to call it, the BRZ or the GT80, GR86, GT86. It was horrendous. It was just not reliable. It was horrible. The new engine supposedly is all new and improved and this and that, but I reserve my comments until I actually see one and see the first disasters that come after. We've only seen one. I've only sat in one, seen one only. So I really don't have much of an opinion. Yes, we have the technical training, all that stuff. We've been through that. But I'll wait to have one. We'll wait to see a few of them before I make a comment about it, honestly. Okay, Mrs. Carcare, now send me one of the questions here. So, Carolis B. 2011 Lexus IS 250, 115,000 miles, 6-speed automatic transmission fluid has never been changed. Should I drain and fill or do nothing? I'm planning to drive it a lot. So, at 115,000 miles, there's a little bit of risk of potential issues. I would take a small sample of fluid, see how it looks. Does it look burned? Does it look, you know, gritty, very gritty? If it looks clean and it does have good color, doesn't smell, smells like transmission fluid, simple drain and fill, single drain and fill, and call it a day. I don't think that's a bad idea. But if it looks past it, just leave it alone. At that point, you might have issues replacing it. Okay. Prince Albert's 2012 Camry Hybrid, when steering at low speed, 5 to 10 miles an hour, there is a slight light popping or bumping sound that I can feel on the steering wheel. Dealer said there's nothing wrong. Should I be worried? So I'm going to tell you a very specific procedure that I want you to try before anything, because this is something that we've been seeing quite a few of. This could be something called an intermediate shaft, small little shaft about this long, collapsible shaft that connects the steering column to the actual rack and pinion. Very common. You're gonna, if you read that, research it on the internet, you'll read that many models have this issue. But one thing that is interesting about the newer one, if you there's a 12 millimeter bolt that kind of goes through to hold the yoke to the steering column. If you loosen that bolt and move the yoke a little bit and then tighten it, we've seen cases where this goes away. That is one thing I want you to check. The second thing is, which is also not as common, but we've seen them, so I want you to look at it first. The motor itself on the steering column is electric power steering. So there's a motor that sits on the steering column. We've seen a few cases where they get loose. Don't know why they get loose. They shouldn't, but they do. And it'll make a very, you said light popping or bumping. This will be not light, but it could be just starting. So I would loosen that shaft, tighten it, pull it up a little bit and tighten it. Then check the motor. You're going to want to hold the motor and kind of rock it back and forth. If you feel it moving and clunking, could be loose. Few bolts, tighten them, maybe a little bit of Loctite, and life is good. These are the two things I would look at. All right, folks. So I'm going to move to the end of the chat and we're going to talk. How you guys doing? Do you notice my new friend over here? We have a new microphone because today was bad microphone day. This is the best part. See, mechanics fix cars, but when it comes to equipment and figuring out how this whole camera thing works, I do have struggled sometimes. I will say, gotten better. Although, Happy Hippo, is that the big news? No, that's not the big news. My microphone actually broke this morning. I was recording. I have a nightshade. What was it called? Corolla that I was filming with, and the microphone flat broke. The old microphone. I don't have it here. I would have shown it to you guys, but it's a lavalier mic. You know, the one that you've seen in every single video. It finally broke. It's been over. What I think this was. Wait a second. I think this was the original microphone from the channel, but sorry, I'm reading some of your comments. That was the original microphone. It finally broke today. I bought another one, but now we're experimenting with a few. But I saw this and it seemed like a good price. I'm like, I always see these live streams that have the fancy microphones. So let's buy it. Everybody is waiting for the big news. And folks, let me give you an update on that. We have something very big, in case you don't know about it. Something very big is happening. I would describe it as life changing. Unfortunately, I will not be able to share a lot of information because Mrs. Carcana already given me a look. Um, Here's what I'll tell you. Around April 1st, maybe the first week of April, I will be able to actually tell you what's going on in the background and show you. So there is your hint right there. So Mrs. Carcana is digging up a question. Probably Hot Rods 1949. Probably broke because you were singing again. Oh, we don't want to scare humanity with me singing. That's I'll just stick to talking. How about that? Oh boy. Family coming. Miles Glide. I need to respond to your email, by the way. Guys, I have to say this. Emails are really getting tough. I stopped a little bit for on emails because I have something else going on. If you have a question you like answered, leave a comment and I will get back to you. If you don't hear back in 48 hours, just post it again. I will try my best. I am getting um, a lot of comments lately, and it's really hard to keep up with them with daily life and work and doing the recording videos and all that. Daniel says you purchased a new house. Come on, man. You know what I told you? You know when we bought this house, I told Mrs. Carcare I would like to move out of this house in a coffin because I really don't like moving. I'm an old soul and I like stability. And Hubert L, I thought we were friends, man. You wrote baby, come on. No, you are moving. Here's another one. You are moving to Tennessee where Scotty Kilmer lived. Mrs. Carrington, I wouldn't mind that living in Tennessee for the weather, but no, that's no. No, you can't find it. Well, there is a question that we missed that Mrs. Carcarnot wanted me to answer by Mr. Fly. Is it Mr. Fly? Mr. Fly J, if you're still on the live stream, post your question or um, leave it as a comment after that, and I'll look at it. Mrs. Carkin, I'll pull it off. I want to give a shout out first to all of you guys who are watching the live stream, which I really appreciate. You guys keep me going. There are times where things get tough, and I work a lot of hours, and things get tough. But you guys keep me going with your comments, with how nice you are. I really appreciated that, and Juan Ramirez, thank you so much for your generosity, sir. I appreciate it. I want to give a shout out to Andrew GYNY. Now, Andrew is a good friend, although I don't know him in real life, but we've talked here and there. He has a heart of gold. He's a ex Nissan technician, currently a Toyota technician, and he has a heart of gold because I always see his comments here and there trying to help people answer their question. He has a heart of gold, and I really appreciate you for that, Andrew. And sometimes I see you disappear from the channel, then you're back. And every time I see you back, I really appreciate you, sir. All right, guys. So, no, she couldn't find it. Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching the channel. So next, Joey the Dime. When will we see Mrs. Car Carnot in front of the camera? Well, oh, here we go. Let's answer this last question because this is something that Mrs. Carr can flagged for me. I have a 2000. I have an ES 330 that runs smooth, but I get 50 miles per gallon mix. What could be there is the issue? So check your brakes for seizing up. Check your tires, what brand of tires, tire pressure, the standard checks. Some of these ES 350s, if you drive them city only and you're a little bit on the heavy side, they really get bad gas mileage. But do a test. Drive it on highway. Try to follow another, like a semi or something. These were known, the ES, but you said ES 330. Sorry, I was talking the 350. That could be normal. Sorry, I thought it was an ES 350. It's an ES 330. That could be normal for these. They don't exactly get the best gas mileage in the world, but Do check your tires, do check your brakes, specifically the rear brakes. They did have a little bit of a tendency to seize up, and yeah, if that's the case, if they're seizing up, you're gonna have some issues. Folks, thank you so much for watching the channel. And I do have, actually, there is a surprise for you here. Mrs. Carcera is ready to say hello. So come on over. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Mrs. Carcera. Come on down. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be okay. Well,
Hi, everyone.
meet my better half and Mrs. Carcera, aka the boss.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Okay.
See everybody saying hello.
Hi, everyone. Okay.
Mrs. Carcera is too humble. She is camera shy, just like me, like 2 years ago. Now I'm getting used to it. And yeah, so this is Mrs. Carcera. Now you've seen her. She's very shy from the camera, and I'll give her space. But hey, this is a start. Maybe she'll help me with. She does a lot in the background, but maybe now she will join me. She still wants to do her channel. She wants some motivation. Well, actually, that's my version of the things. She's very nervous about being on camera, but if you see her channel here and there in the comments, do subscribe to her, because I made her. She made a promise. If she gets 100 subscribers, she'll start her own channel, and it'll be about cooking. This is something she enjoys, and I love her cooking because it's the best. But yeah, if you see her comment here and there, subscribe so we can motivate her to start. Her channel is her username. When you see it in the comments, just click on it and go to it and do subscribe. All right, guys, we're gonna go spend some family time. Thank you so much for joining the live stream. I really appreciate it. And next week we're not gonna have a live stream because I will be filming um, the water pump video. It's one that you really requested, and this is on that what was it, the Avalon 2011 Avalon, the one with the interior that was all tore up. Really nice guy that owns it. He volunteered it to bring it back, and we're going to do the water pump video. It's going to take a very long time, probably take me all day to get you the best high quality video on a water pump. So we're going to cancel the live stream for next week for that, but then we should be back the week after. Guys and gals, thank you so much for watching the channel. I really appreciate it. And until the next live stream or video, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you guys have a wonderful day.